Hello. When I was first asked to share a few thoughts, I was kind of given some ideas of maybe speaking about Gasper or Albertini or something else along that sort. And although I'm no expert on those matters, I do know our community stories. But if I were to share something of those sorts, in one sense, it would just be a repeating of what others have written. And yet this week, as I did some more reflecting and thinking about our upcoming feast this Sunday, the body and blood of Christ, Corpus Christi, there was something more that spoke to me from that feast. As we celebrate this great feast of the body and blood of Christ, we know that gift of the Eucharist that we share, that gift of the Eucharist that feeds us in our body, mind, and soul. And for many of us right now in the situation where we find ourselves in regards to this pandemic, many of us are unable to attend Mass, to come together as that community to receive that Eucharist, to receive that body and blood of Christ. And although many churches are live streaming and sharing the Mass via social media, it's just not quite the same. Yes, we speak the words of the Eucharistic prayer. Yes, we speak the words of the Mass. And although the Eucharist is important to us, there's something about coming forward to receiving the body of Christ, to receiving from the cup, to do just as Jesus commanded us, take and eat, take and drink. There's that physical act that speaks to us deep down in our soul. And although as we live stream and watch the Mass on our many devices, we hear the words, but there's a part of that community that gathers that we're still missing. And over these past few weeks, different people have been asking me, when are we going to return to Mass? When are we going to share the Eucharist again? And in one sense, it's not so much, I believe, missing the church building as it is missing that community that gathers, being a part of that community that comes together to share those times together. When I first arrived here at Centerville and also became pastor of the church in Melrose, each Sunday for several Sundays in a row, I had one gentleman come up to me and ask, "Father, when are we going to have coffee and donuts again after Mass?" Well, because I now pastor the two parishes, we had to change the Mass schedule for Sunday morning. We have 8 o'clock Mass at Melrose and 10:30 Mass in Centerville. And so to have coffee and donuts after the 10:30 Mass was a bit late for people in regards to lunch. And what I didn't catch at first was why this gentleman was so adamant about coffee and donuts. But what I later came to realize was what he was missing was that community that gathered. And then in November, when we flip-flopped the Mass schedule, and we then began having the 8 o'clock Mass in Centerville, we were able once again to have coffee and donuts. And the first few Sundays of that, he was there present, and he had the biggest grin on his face as he had his cup of coffee and his donut. And as he moved around the tables, visiting with people, it was his social interaction. It was his way of being community. It was his way of being fed and being nourished. And it was from that experience that speaks to me today. What is it that we long for? What is it that feeds us in our lives right now in the midst of all that's going on? What is it that we're missing and that we are hungry for? I believe it's that social interaction. It's that time of coming together as a community. Yes, we can stay connected to one another through social media and picking up the phone and calling one another and reaching out via email and the old snail mail of writing a letter, a note to one another. Yes, those are great ways to stay in contact with one another. But more importantly, it's that social interaction. It's that physical presence with one another. And so today, as I continue to think about the Feast of the Body and Blood of Christ, in light of all that's going on around us, where do we continue to feed ourselves? Where do we continue to reach out and to feed one another? For we are the body and blood of Christ through the community that gathers. We do indeed feed one another as we share our lives with one another and share the things that are happening. And I too miss being able to have Mass. For the people coming together and gathering, we continue to know those things that feed us in our body and soul, the things that give us hope and strength. And it's more than just the food that we eat. It's those interactions with others. It's the way we stand with one another. And in light of all that's going on in the world around us, we do indeed stand with one another as community, as neighbors, supporting one another. In this kind of in-between time of moving from the stay at home to going back out into public again, we do recognize the need that we have to interact with others, that social contact. And yeah, we might have kept our social distancing, but there's still something important about being together as community, coming together, and trying to find a balance in our lives right now of what it means to be distant, but still connected. I definitely look forward to the day when we can open those church doors, welcome everyone in once again, and have that grand celebration of Easter, that welcome home, that coming together again to celebrate, to be together as the body and blood of Christ. May we share that gift of who we are, to feed and nourish one another. And may we also know what we need to feed ourselves, that we can continue to be that source of spirit and hope for one another.